we've been doing this sort of roadshow pretty regularly, kind of introducing ourselves. People often ask what the authority of the committee is, and the authority of the committee is consensus. We bring people together, we bring in experts, we turn those experts' ideas into recommendations, and then we work with everyone to try to implement it. But we don't pass things or implement things through force of will. We don't have legislative authority, we can't pass law. But we bring a bipartisan group of members together, and I mean that, it's 6 and 6, to a place of consensus through hard work, through really answering every possible question, and getting to a good place. I myself, I've been working on the Hill for about 15 years now. I came into this work working for Mr. Kilmer, and we had this idea together that we are going to solve the problems of Congress and make it a more effective place for the American people. It's not just about identifying the problems and coming up with solutions. It's identifying why there are problems and how did we get here and how do we figure out the proper solution to get out of it. And that's something we skip over a lot in Congress. We either just try to come up with a solution quickly that doesn't necessarily answer everything, or sometimes we even create solutions for problems that don't exist. And that's way too common, and our committee doesn't do that. Our committee really goes through the steps to try to understand that. And it's an interesting thing for me as a progressive Democrat, as your typical San Francisco liberal Jew, right? Like, this is who I am. It is a reality. I don't hide it, right? People make fun of me a little bit as Mr. Bipartisan, but that was never the point. The point is I like structure. I like understanding how things work. And I have personally a belief in empowerment rather than mandates. And that allows, I think, myself and Harley and I to work through things together, and we disagree. Regularly. But the point is not to win an argument. The point is to figure out how to get it done, and we do it regularly, and it's wildly entertaining. And everyone on our team identifies the same way. There are not Republicans and Democrats in the office. We are all one team. We're all one budget, the smallest budget of any committee, but it goes a lot farther if you don't have to divide it up between two offices. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. For those who don't know a whole lot about the committee, they happen every 30 years or so. Congress decides things aren't working the way that we want them to. They come up with a committee to try to fix it or identify some of the problems. Sometimes they come up with solutions, and sometimes they frankly fail. This committee has been around for one Congress so far. I was not a part of it. I was working for Chairman Takano at the time, but I helped out a little bit. And they got extended to another Congress. That's when Derek Harley and I started. And so there's 97 recommendations that have been issued. We continue to offer recommendations as we go along. We are almost done with our first tranche of recommendations, which are going to cover interns, staffing, capacity, diversity, and accessibility. It's interesting because we're working on the recommendations while we're doing hearings on civility and collaboration. And notice how I didn't just say bipartisanship, civility and getting along and working together. That doesn't mean laying down your arms. It means coming together with your core beliefs and getting somewhere that is productive for the American people. So that's what we're working on right now, although we're finishing up our recommendation on that first tranche. It's really a blessing to be here. I love the work that I'm doing, but we only have another year and a half, so we are at a full sprint. And with that, I think I'll hand it off to my partner in crime.
Thanks, Yuri. Yeah, I will say that we like to lead by example, right? If we can do it, you can do it. So here we have born in San Francisco, raised in San Francisco. Dad was a union organizer. First job in politics was Nancy Pelosi. Me, born in rural Pennsylvania. Get the government out of my way. I'm trying to live my life. So, and I do believe that at the end of the day, I've said this from the very beginning. Republicans and Democrats, we share the same goals. Everyone wants a strong country, prosperous country, and a better future for our kids and grandkids. We just have a different thoughts about how to get there, right? And so if we can kind of figure out how to talk to each other in a way that lets you work through those differences, which I think sometimes is where the challenge is. I think you can kind of try to figure these things out. And that's where the construct of this committee comes in. And I'm not naive. I do think that we look at the world differently. He and I approach problems differently. And that's what was a really cool thing to think about, and one of the things that attracted me to the job when I came back from being in the private sector for a couple of years is, I'd love to learn to see how does Yuri think about these, how does he approach problems, and how do I approach problems, and so together we make decisions on small things like management decisions and big things like policy decisions, and we don't always agree, but we find ways that we trust each other, and I really like him as a person. We are able to figure out ways to get through it. So I think it's an interesting construct. So I don't have too much to add to what Yuri already said, but I do like to say that I like to ask the question when I talk to groups is, before you came here today, how many people by show of hands actually heard about the select committee or knew that it existed? Pretty good. Okay.
I like this audience.
I was actually... Right, because Jim's so proactive about letting people know. When I found out about the position back early this year, I was struck by the number of people who didn't know about the fact that it existed. And that was actually here in town among people whose job it is to know what's going on the Hill. It was also mostly among the American people. I mean, I live in Ohio. I commute back and forth. I was in a law firm out there for a couple of years. And nobody out there in the real world knows that this is happening. And when they find out about the fact that it's happening, they're super excited. I mean, from my neighbors to my pastor to the lawyers and staff at my law firm, they're like, oh my gosh, wow, that's so awesome that Congress is doing that. And they get so energized about it. And I say to people, I think that the American people are really hungry for this kind of thing. And I don't mean like the select committee per se, but the fact that there's a group of members on our committee, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, all of whom agreed to do this because it's important to them, because the institution's important to them. And the fact that there are members back here that are working on that problem and trying to make it better, I think gets people really fired up. So there's, to be a little, not cynical about it, but there's a lot of political value for members, I think, in talking about this sort of thing. And in that vein, I think I give our members a ton of credit. I did not know Chairman Kilmer from the Democrat side. I spent my whole career up here working for Republicans. He is a tremendous member of Congress, amazing public servant. I'm so impressed with him. Thinks through problems, super thoughtful. And then same with Mr. Timmons. South Carolina, didn't know him. Second term, took over for Trey Grady. Just loves the institution, wants to make it better for staff, wants to figure out ways to kind of tackle the big problems. Sort of members that we need to be doing these things. And I mean, I think one of the problems that we have is, and I don't like to blame the media, but one of the reasons I think that people don't know about the community or don't know about the good things that's happening is like they're not focused on this sort of thing, right? I mean, I think the way, I'm not blaming them, it's just the way the business cycle works is, they're a lot anxious to hear about the bad things that are happening, the conflict, the contention, not so much the good things. And so, that's really what the American people hear about. So it's on us, I think, to try to get out there and spread the message. And we're going to be doing, hopefully, a better job of that. In fact, one of the things we're going to try to do this year is hopefully a couple of field hearings to try to bring the committee out to the American people so that we can get good ideas, listen to them, spread the word a little bit, maybe get the local media excited about this and start to kind of get people's impressions of Congress and how it's working and operating a little bit bucked up. So with that said, love to take your questions, talk to you, and hear what you're thinking. So thanks again for having us.
Great, guys. Thank you very much. All right. Well, everybody is thinking of questions. Let me start it off with one, especially dealing with the pandemic. So many offices up here are now trying to figure out what to do and talking to different chiefs, saying that they really want, and some of the staff said, wait a minute, all I do is answer mail. I can do this at home very easy. Or conversely, there's nothing going on in the Hill, why don't I just stay home and work? What are some of the new modern things that you hope to go forward and think through that will help with this pandemic and what's going to happen for the remainder of this year, and if it should come back in full force next year?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been on the Hill for a while. Later on in management, not always there, and I've had good bosses and I've had horrible bosses. Right? It's the culture of the Hill, and from both offices, I always took what I liked, and I told myself if I became a manager, I was going to try to get rid of what I didn't like, because the Hill is a place of, it's always been this way, so it needs to continue to be this way. And that just isn't how I view it. And I don't think that's how Mr. Kilmer views it, Mr. Timmons views it, or Derek Harley views it, right? And so 6 years ago, I wrote one of the first telecommuting policies to ever exist on the Hill, and it was one day a month during recess, you could and it was seen as the most generous, benefit you could find on the Hill. And it's laughable at this point after the last year and a half. We, in the last year and a half, have upgraded technologies on the Hill. Modernization Committee is doing great work making recommendations, but it is a real team effort and really exciting place to be between the Chief Administrative Office, the Architect of the Capitol, really upgrading technology. You used to not be able to access your email, your shared files in a meaningful way. You really weren't doing the work. It was people on their phone pretending like they were doing the work. That's not the case anymore. You can work from home. Now, there is huge value in doing things in person. Members are already pulled every which way, and the ability for one to just grab someone on the floor and have that conversation instead of scheduling a meeting is unbelievably valuable, and we're never going to get past that point. But we've upgraded technologies, whether it's the use of Microsoft Teams, whether it's OneDrive for all of our files. We do all of our staff calls on Teams. We do video through the system. Add on, there's a little bit of a burnout but we really have upgraded our systems, and Congress can do it. I think it was Jake Sherman on his podcast today, and it was like modernization of Congress. That is like an oxymoron, and it's an annoying thing because we can do these things and we are doing these things. So what do we hold on to post-pandemic? There are going to be telecommuting policies. That is a reality of the Hill now, and it will lead to less burnout, higher level of retention, more job satisfaction, and more effectiveness. Additionally, even if we all come back to the office, the communication lines between the district office and the DC office have become so much better. That's always been a point of contention and frustration in an office, is that ability to communicate, and that has permanently improved, and we should celebrate that and continue to do that. We still have a lot to modernize as we're all coming back. This is one of the things we talk about. If in our office, we are all 14 people in one room, and if one person's taking a phone call, basically everybody's taking a phone call. It's that old that glitter adage, right? If one kid's playing with glitter, everyone's playing with glitter. We've been thinking through these things. I mean, we are actually going to be putting into our office a soundproof phone booth, which is just in a little corner. It might not work for everyone. We're testing it out. But the idea is you can lead briefings from there. You can take phone calls in there, and it's not disruptive of everybody. We'll see how it works out, but that's the kind of things that we need to start thinking about, how we change our offices, how they work and how they're structured. The last thing is, I would point out, this is something we've been looking into a lot, is remote internships and fellowships. And these are things that are going to require quite a bit of thought that goes into them, right? Accessing our network, the house network, if we want to secure it, takes some time to understand. Making sure we maintain inventory of equipment takes some time. Ensuring we have a strong educational component remotely. These are really difficult things to do remotely for an intern, but these are things that we are, as a committee, looking into and trying to help work through.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I'd add is I think at some point, it's like anything, the things like the pandemic emergencies, they force you to focus the mind when things happen that you might not, or they happen more quickly than they might otherwise would. I suspect at some point, and not to speak for the chairman and vice chairman, but at some point, it might be a good topic for a hearing to take a look and see what's the good stuff that we want to take with us and maybe not the other stuff that you want to kind of leave behind. And a lot of that is in the technology space. I mean, the amount of Zooming and things, I like to do things in person. So I'm excited to see us back and do our meetings in person, but it is an additional tool that you could have to meet with people that sometimes you otherwise wouldn't. And then on the telecommuting thing, I agree with you, Jim. In fact, we talked about this the other week frankly, the workplace has changed. And we both realize that. And, I believe that we are back in the office now, and I think we have sort of led a little bit on that. I think we're back in. We came back in the week after the 4th of July. We gave people a 30-day time period to come back because we realized for the last year and a half they've been working remotely. You can't expect people to do it on the dime. And to see them in person. There's just the interactions that you see that just would not have happened if we weren't there. Someone sitting on the edge of their desk or Yuri yelling to me over his shoulder, hey, can you take a look at this? Like the things that happen, there's just something with the human interaction I think that makes you more productive. So I do think it's important to be there. But by the same token, from a staff perspective, I can see me to them saying, you got to be back here every week for the rest of the year. I mean, they're thinking to themselves, well, what the heck? I've been doing this for a year and a half, and it's, I've been getting my job done. So I just don't think it rings true with them. So you got to find a balance, right? So that's where we said, well, let's do this telecommuting thing, which had been kind of talked about a little bit, hadn't really been a thing on the Hill, although I think it probably private sectors, agencies had been a thing. So we put something in place where you get a certain number of days per month to telecommute, way more than one. It's a number that's kind of calculated based on the fact it gives us probably the flexibility to telecommute on days when we're out of session. If you can't do them when you're in session, so basically the whole recess week and maybe that Monday or Friday during the session weeks, it has some accountability for us. You have to check in with us. You have to ask. There's a telecommuting agreement, all sorts of things. But it's a sort of balance that's struck between us getting them in and making them more productive, but them also having some flexibility. I mean, it's only been a month, and I think it's been pretty well received. So hopefully, but that's the route we chose. But I do think, that's the way you strike the balance, kind of recognize that the world has changed a little bit.
Was it welcomed by both Democrat and Republican offices in terms of this? I mean, because different members think differently about this. And I was wondering, what are the differences between Democratic philosophy on this versus a Republican, or is that just bogus and everybody's thinking the same way?
I don't know. I think that there's a perception of that. From my experience on the Hill, management is not something that is different by parties. Like, people manage offices differently. I have Republican colleagues who are really forward thinking in their offices and how they treat staff and how they retain them and how they train them, and the same on the Democratic side. And the bad end of that also kind of lands where it's Republican and Democrats. One of the things that the Hill needs to work on universally across both aisles is management in general, and having a holistic view of what management of a congressional office looks like, and listen to the needs of the people that work for them so that they feel like a team. And then when they create policies, they are policies that are expected to be used. We have this mentality on the Hill of, if we give you telecommuting days, you're not actually supposed to use them. And we don't believe that. Like, on our committee, we reinforce, use what you have. Our committee is unique in that we have a bunch of people who really want to be there and have a year and a half. So most of them come in and don't use the telecommuting days as much as, frankly, I think that they should. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't think it. I know there have been stories about that, but I'll be frank, I don't think it's a partisan thing.
I believe there are 99 state legislatures, state legislative bodies, and your bosses, the chair and vice chair, both served in the state legislatures. How have you used the innovations and ideas from the different states to sort of help figure out what Congress can do better?
So NCSL and a few others, they participated a lot in the last Congress. And like I said, I wasn't quite there, so I don't know a lot of the history of it. We are going to continue to engage with them. We're going to be doing field hearings in districts, and a lot of that is going to be based on working with state legislatures to try to understand practices they have there. You hear Chairman Kilmer regularly talk about his experience in the Washington State Legislature, and it really does inform a lot of the work that we do, of that you can't create rules to make people be nice to one another, right? That's just not how, but when his experience in the Washington Legislature, where there were a lot of open rules, it was a norm. It was a norm that you didn't take advantage of that, and you didn't try to jam each other up. And there are underlying things in our system that encourage people to act out in our system. And so let's try to understand what it is in the Washington State Legislature that makes people not feel like they need to lash out every time there's an open rule. So that's definitely something we're going to be looking at. And I know there's history, but I don't have firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, but it's a super insightful question. I mean, I think, like Yuri said, I think for both of our bosses here, Kilmer and Timmons, their experiences here are really colored by their experience in the state legislature. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it's the way it should be. The states are the laboratories of democracy, right? So we should be looking at them for our ideas, and in a lot of different ways. And why not, for sure on policy, but why not in terms of the way they run their legislature? So last year, I believe there probably was a hearing or two that utilized them. This year, for example, we actually kicked around the idea for this hearing yesterday is what's working with committees in the states. What are they doing? Because we're always looking for recommendations and ideas rather than making it out of whole cloth. Let's see what you can think about in terms of means of comparison. But I know, Kilmer talks about, like Yuri said, when he was in the state legislature, they didn't have gotcha amendments. Everything was under an open rule. I forget what he says. He's like, I can count on like one, not too many times that they have something closed. You can just go out there and vote. So that colors his impression. And for Timmons, he is really interested in the relationship building. He's like, I can't believe that it's so hard to get to know people here. We gotta. And he talks about in South Carolina, the legislature was small. You knew everybody. And so you're down there on the floor talking about stuff. He's like, no one says anything stupid because you get ostracized because everyone knows you, and then you just don't do that. And that's how they develop their norms, right? So you bring that back. So like Yuri said, we're doing these field hearings, and we're going out to hopefully, as risk of saying this because we keep having a hard time finding dates, whatever, but we're going to go hopefully out to the chairman's district in Washington State, and he talks a lot about maybe bringing in their speaker of their state house from out there and talking about the things that they're doing and the things that work and anything we could adopt. And we'll hopefully be doing more of that and talking to NCSL and other organizations that are trying to steal their good ideas. And because, I think it's a good place to start.